Sure. Here's the first section written with sharp, to the point humor and engaging dialogue, adhering to your word count and style guidelines. The house was unusually quiet, a kind of eerie calm that made me suspicious. Mom was gone for the weekend on one of her girls' trips, and I was left alone with my stepdad, Greg. Greg was the kind of guy who wore socks with sandals and thought dad jokes were peak comedy. He was harmless, if not painfully awkward. I was scrolling on my phone when I heard it, muffled cursing and the sound of running water coming from the bathroom. My curiosity got the better of me. I walked down the hallway, half expecting to find him fixing a leak or something equally mundane. What I didn't expect was Greg, standing in the middle of the bathroom in nothing but his boxers and a stained t-shirt, his head slathered in what looked like melted orange crayon. "What the hell?" I blurted. Greg jumped like a guilty kid caught sneaking candy. "Oh. Hey, you weren't supposed to see this." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "See what? You joining a clown college? Or is this your audition for worst midlife crisis ever?" He glared at me, his hands dripping with orange dye. "It's hair dye. Your mom keeps saying I'm looking old, so I thought I'd spruce things up a bit." I squinted at him. "By turning your head into a traffic cone? Bold choice." "Hey, it's supposed to be dark blonde," he said defensively. "The bottle said golden sand. Looks more like nuclear fallout." I deadpanned. Greg huffed and turned back to the mirror, muttering to himself. The dye was smeared unevenly across his scalp, and patches of gray hair were still visible. It was a disaster. "I think I missed a spot," he said, squinting at the back of his head. "You missed all the spots," I replied. "And whatever you were aiming for, too," he groaned, holding up the empty bottle. "I thought this would be easy. Your mom makes it look easy." "Yeah, because she doesn't use industrial-strength road paint," I said, gesturing at the mess. Greg looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Can you help me fix this? Please? Your mom can't see me like this. She'll never let me live it down." I stared at him, incredulous. "You want me to help? The same person who once glued their hand to a mug in kindergarten? I'm desperate," he said, waving his arms dramatically and splattering dye on the wall. "You're my only hope." Against my better judgment, and because the thought of Mom roasting him for eternity was slightly cruel, I grabbed the box of dye. "Fine. But if this goes south, you're taking all the blame." "Deal," he said quickly. I put on the flimsy gloves that came with the box and tried to spread the dye evenly across his scalp. It was like trying to frost a cake made of sandpaper. The more I worked, the worse it got. "This stuff is drying faster than my will to live," I muttered. Greg laughed nervously. "You're funny. Your mom always says you're funny." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, well, she also married you, so her judgment's questionable." We were halfway through when disaster struck. I'd accidentally grabbed a second bottle from under the sink without reading the label. The moment I mixed it with the existing dye, it started to fizz. Is it supposed to do that?" Greg asked, his eyes wide. "No," I said flatly, watching as the mixture bubbled like a science experiment gone wrong. Before I could stop it, the fizzing dye started to drip down his face. Greg yelped, grabbing a towel to wipe it off. The towel, of course, was white. "Great," I said. "Now it looks like you murdered a bottle of orange soda." Greg stared at his reflection, horrified. "Oh my God! I look like a rejected extra from a Halloween movie." "That's generous," I said, trying not to laugh. "More like an Oompa Loompa who got laid off." He groaned, clutching the towel like a lifeline. "This is a disaster. What if your mom comes home early? Then you're screwed," I said, stepping back to admire my handiwork, or lack thereof. "But hey, at least you'll have a great story for her book club." Greg shot me a look. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Immensely," I said with a grin. Just then, the doorbell rang. We both froze. "Who's that?" he whispered, like we were in a heist movie. "How should I know?" I whispered back. Greg panicked, grabbing a shower cap and shoving it over his head. The cap barely fit, and orange dye oozed out the sides like molten lava. "Go see who it is," he hissed. I shook my head. "Not a chance. I'm not covering for you." "Please," he begged. With a dramatic sigh, I walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw our nosy neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, standing there with a casserole dish. "It's Mrs. Higgins," I said, turning back to Greg. His face turned pale, or as pale as it could under all that dye. "Oh no. Not her. She'll tell your mom everything." I smirked. "Looks like you're on your own, Stepdad." End of section 1. The moment I shut the door on Mrs. Higgins, Greg burst into the hallway like a man on a mission, still wearing the shower cap that looked ready to give up on life. The orange dye continued to seep out in streaks, trailing down his face and neck. It was a sight so absurd, I couldn't hold back the snort of laughter that escaped me. "Not helping!" he barked, clutching at the cap like it was his last shred of dignity. "We need to fix this, now!" "Relax, Picasso," I said, grabbing a box of tissues. "We'll figure it out. Although, at this point, shaving your head might be your best option." He recoiled as if I'd suggested cutting off a limb. "Shave my head? Are you crazy? Your mom loves my hair." "Does she?" I asked skeptically. "Because she's always telling you to get a haircut. This might actually make her happy." Greg ignored me, yanking off the shower cap with a dramatic flair. Big mistake. The cap stuck to his hair, and when he pulled, it ripped out a chunk of orange-dyed strands. "Oh God!" he yelped, holding the cap like it had personally betrayed him. "Yikes," I said, wincing. "Looks like you're going for the patchy bald look. Very avant-garde." "Stop joking," he snapped, pacing the hallway in his boxers. "Think. What do we do?" I folded my arms, trying not to laugh at the dye dripping onto his chest. "We could try washing it out and starting over. But honestly, at this point, you might just want to lean into the clown aesthetic. Get a red nose, big shoes, you'll be a hit at kids' parties." Greg shot me a glare. "I'm serious. This is my marriage we're talking about." I sighed and followed him back to the bathroom. He stood in front of the mirror, poking at his hair like it was a wounded animal. I grabbed a bottle of clarifying shampoo from the counter. "All right, sit down," I said, motioning to the edge of the tub. He hesitated. "You're not going to make it worse, are you? Worse than this?" I gestured at the neon orange disaster on his head. "Not possible." Greg reluctantly sat down, and I started scrubbing his hair like I was washing a dirty car. The dye didn't budge. Instead, the water turned a sickly orange color that looked like we were trying to dye Easter eggs. "This stuff is like cement," I muttered, rinsing out another round of suds. "What the hell did you use?" "I told you, it was your mom's fancy stuff," he said defensively. "She's always bragging about how it makes her hair shiny and soft." "Yeah, because she uses it properly," I said, grabbing another bottle. "Not like a toddler finger painting on their scalp." Greg groaned, tilting his head back under the faucet. "This isn't funny." "It's a little funny," I said, smirking. The bathroom was starting to resemble a crime scene, with orange splatters on the walls, sink, and my shirt. Greg looked like a cartoon character who'd been dunked in radioactive sludge. "You know," I said, grabbing a towel to wipe my hands, "this might actually be a blessing in disguise. Mom's always saying you need to embrace your age. Maybe this is the universe's way of telling you to stop fighting it." Greg scowled at me. "I'm not old. I'm distinguished." I raised an eyebrow. "You're distinguished, all right. Distinguished from anyone with functioning eyesight." Before he could retort, the doorbell rang again. Greg froze, his eyes wide with panic. "Don't answer it," he whispered. "Why not?" I asked, already heading toward the door. "What if it's someone who knows your mom?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. "I can't let anyone see me like this." I sighed and peeked through the peephole. It wasn't Mrs. Higgins this time, but a delivery guy holding a package. "It's just a delivery," I said, yanking the door open. The guy handed me the box, glanced over my shoulder, and did a double take. Greg was lurking in the hallway, half hidden behind the doorframe, with streaks of orange dye running down his face. Everything okay here? The delivery guy asked, clearly trying not to laugh. Totally fine, I said, plastering on a fake smile. Just a little home renovation project. Right, the guy said, eyeing Greg one last time before hurrying back to his truck. Greg groaned, slumping against the wall. This is a nightmare. Could be worse, I said, setting the package on the counter. At least he didn't call the cops. Greg glared at me. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Immensely, I said, grinning. We went back to the bathroom for round 2. This time, I tried a deep cleaning conditioner, hoping it would soften the dye enough to scrub it out. No luck. Instead, Greg's hair started to clump together like wet spaghetti. Oh God, he said, staring at his reflection in horror. I look like a troll doll. Correction, I said, trying not to laugh. You look like a troll doll that got run over by a lawnmower. Greg groaned, burying his face in his hands. Your mom's going to kill me. Probably, I said, patting him on the shoulder. But hey, at least you'll die looking fabulous. You're the worst, he muttered. And yet here I am, helping you anyway, I said, tossing the conditioner bottle into the trash. You owe me big time for this. Fine, he said, sighing. Name your price. I thought about it for a moment. You're taking the blame for this mess if Mom finds out. Deal? Deal, he said, groaning again as he stared at the mirror. Good, I said, grabbing a comb. Now let's see if we can make you look slightly less terrifying before she gets home. End of section 2. The bathroom had officially become a war zone. The walls bore streaks of orange dye, the sink was clogged with clumps of Greg's hair, and my patience was hanging by a thread. Greg, on the other hand, was spiraling into full-blown crisis mode. He sat on the edge of the tub, clutching his head like he was mourning the loss of his dignity, which, to be fair, was long gone. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. We need a new plan. Clearly, washing it out isn't working. Greg looked up at me, his eyes wide with desperation. What do you suggest? Shaving my head? Because that's not happening. Relax, I said, rolling my eyes. I'm not going to shave your head. Yet. He groaned, burying his face in his hands. Your mom is going to walk in and see this disaster. She'll never let me live it down. Probably not, I agreed, grabbing a towel to wipe the dye off my hands. But hey, at least she'll have a great story for her friends. That's not helping, Greg snapped, throwing his hands in the air. I ignored him, rummaging through the cabinets for something, anything, that might salvage the situation. That's when I spotted it, a box of hair toner, tucked behind a bottle of hairspray. Found something, I said, holding up the box. Greg squinted at it. What's that? It's toner, I explained. It's supposed to neutralize bad color jobs. Might take the edge off the orange. Or it might make it worse, he muttered. Do you have a better idea? I shot back. He sighed. Fine. Do it. I read the instructions carefully this time, lesson learned, and mixed the toner with the developer. The smell was enough to make my eyes water, but I powered through, smearing the mixture onto Greg's hair like I was frosting a particularly tragic cake. Does it have to smell this bad? He complained, wrinkling his nose. Beauty is pain, I said, grinning. Or in your case, humiliation. Greg glared at me but didn't say anything. We waited the recommended 20 minutes, during which Greg paced the bathroom like a caged animal. I leaned against the counter, scrolling through my phone, when he suddenly stopped and turned to me. You're not going to tell anyone about this, right? He asked. Define anyone, I said, smirking. Anyone who knows me, he clarified, narrowing his eyes. No promises, I said, enjoying his look of horror. Finally, it was time to rinse out the toner. Greg leaned over the sink while I carefully washed his hair, praying this would actually work. As the water ran clear, I grabbed a clean towel and handed it to him. Well? He asked, patting his head dry. I motioned toward the mirror. See for yourself. Greg hesitated before turning to look. His reaction was immediate and loud. What the hell? He shouted, running his fingers through his hair. The orange was gone, but in its place was a shade of purple that could only be described as cartoonish. Oh my God! I said, biting back laughter. You look like a grape. This isn't funny! Greg yelled, glaring at me. It's a little funny, I said, doubling over with laughter. Greg stared at his reflection, his face a mix of anger and despair. How did this happen? I don't know, I said, wiping tears from my eyes. But it's kind of amazing. I can't let your mom see me like this, he muttered, pacing the bathroom. She'll think I've lost my mind. To be fair, she wouldn't be entirely wrong, I said, smirking. Greg shot me a look. You're enjoying this way too much. Immensely, I admitted. He groaned, grabbing his phone. I need to call someone. A professional. Someone who can fix this. Good luck finding a hairdresser who takes emergency calls, I said, crossing my arms. Greg ignored me, scrolling through his contacts. What about your aunt? She's a stylist, right? I shook my head. Not a chance. She'll tell Mom, and then you're really screwed. Damn it, he muttered, throwing his phone onto the counter. We stood in silence for a moment, both of us staring at the purple disaster on his head. You know, I said finally, purple's not the worst color. It's kind of bold. Makes a statement. Greg glared at me. Yeah, the statement being, I've completely lost control of my life. Exactly, I said, grinning. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. This is a disaster. Maybe, I said, shrugging. Or maybe it's the start of a new trend. Purple Dad. Could be a thing. Greg didn't look convinced. End of section 3. Greg was still pacing, muttering under his breath about his ruined hair and his impending doom when the sound of the front door opening froze us both in place. She's home, he hissed, spinning to face me with panic written all over his face. What do we do? I glanced at his hair, which was still radiating an unnatural shade of purple under the bathroom lights. Unless you've got a hat big enough to cover that mess, I think we're out of options. Greg's eyes darted around the bathroom like a trapped animal. A towel! I'll wrap a towel around my head and pretend I just got out of the shower. I snorted. Because that won't look suspicious at all. Before he could argue, Mom's voice called out from downstairs. Hello? Anyone home? Greg turned to me, eyes wide with desperation. Stall her. How am I supposed to stall her? I whispered back. I don't know. Just say something, he whispered harshly, grabbing a towel and attempting to wrap it around his head. Reluctantly, I left the bathroom and made my way downstairs, trying to think of a plausible excuse for why Greg wasn't greeting her. Mom was unloading groceries from a paper bag, humming to herself. Hey, Mom, I said, leaning against the kitchen counter. Hi, sweetie, she said, glancing up with a smile. Where's Greg? He's busy, I said, struggling to keep a straight face. Busy? She asked, raising an eyebrow. What's he doing? Just taking care of something, I said vaguely. Mom narrowed her eyes. You're acting weird. What's going on? Nothing, I said quickly, trying to sound casual. Why would you think something's going on? Before she could respond, there was a loud crash from upstairs, followed by a string of colorful curses that could only belong to Greg. Mom frowned. What was that? Probably the wind, I said weakly. She gave me a skeptical look and started toward the stairs. Panicking, I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Wait! You can't go up there! I blurted out. She stopped, crossing her arms. And why not? Because, my mind raced for an excuse. Because Greg's planning a surprise for you. Yeah, a surprise. Mom raised an eyebrow. A surprise? What kind of surprise? It wouldn't be a surprise if I told you, would it? I said, forcing a nervous laugh. Mom didn't look convinced. Move, she said firmly. I reluctantly stepped aside, and she headed upstairs. I followed her, bracing myself for the inevitable fallout. By the time we reached the bathroom, Greg had given up on the towel idea and was now wearing one of Mom's floral shower caps. He stood in front of the mirror, looking utterly defeated. Mom froze in the doorway, taking in the scene. Her eyes widened as she stared at Greg, then at the mess in the bathroom. Finally, her gaze landed on me. What the hell is going on? She demanded. Greg turned to face her, his face a mix of shame and resignation. I can explain, he began. Mom held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. She stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing. Greg and I exchanged confused looks. You're laughing? He asked hesitantly. Mom nodded, doubling over with laughter. You look ridiculous, she managed to say between fits of giggles. Greg's face turned bright red. It's not funny, he protested. It's a little funny, I said, unable to hide my grin. Mom wiped tears from her eyes, still laughing. What were you even trying to do? Greg sighed, running a hand through his purple hair. I was trying to cover my grays. I didn't think it would turn out like this. Mom shook her head, smiling. Greg, you're such an idiot sometimes. Hey, he said, offended. She stepped forward, examining his hair. You know, purple's not a bad look for you. It's bold. That's what I said. I chimed in. Greg groaned. Can we please just fix this? Mom sighed, grabbing her phone. I'll call my stylist. Maybe she can work some magic. Greg perked up. Really? You think she can fix it? Mom smirked. No promises, but it's worth a shot. As she dialed the number, Greg turned to me. You're not going to tell anyone about this, right? Nope, I said, grinning. I'm definitely telling everyone. Greg groaned, burying his face in his hands. I hate you. Mom chuckled, patting him on the shoulder. Get used to it, Purple Dad. And with that, the three of us dissolved into laughter, the absurdity of the situation finally sinking in. It wasn't the outcome Greg had hoped for, but at least we'd all have a story to tell.